Got it.
Got it.
Understood.
Got it. Not leaving.
Okay.
Okay.
So there we go. So when we talk about strength training, the whole point of what I want to talk about today is that we're not just talking about going to the gym and lifting weights, because we are endurance athletes. We're training for endurance events. So we're using strength training as a way to support what we're doing. And I think just the word strength training maybe like gets in people's heads and they're like, that doesn't feel important because I'm not training to be a lifting person. So we're going to kind of reframe the way that we think about strength training and talk about different ways that we can use it to support what we actually do. And then, so then there's two ways that I want to talk about that we can think about this. And the first one is what is specific to triathletes? So what are the exercises and movement patterns that we need to support what we do for swim, biking, and running? And then the second one is we're going to use it to improve our mind-body communication. So we're going to work on the feedback loop that happens in between your brain and your body and talk about different times that, or different ways that you need information. So like what you need when you're training, the feedback that you need when you're training from your body is different than what you need when you're racing. Okay. So when we talk about the basics, like two basic things that I think are the most important thing to think about when anytime that you are doing any exercise or movement pattern, the first one is alignment of your spine. And so when we get muscle imbalances, a lot of times what happens is we're not in proper alignment, and that causes muscles on one side of a joint to be overworked and the other ones to get weakened, and it throws everything off. And then the second one is we want to create a neutral pelvic position. And I was kind of talking to Julie about this a little bit, but one of the, we did 2 strength sessions while she was here that she loved, right?
Oh yeah.
Awesome.
I got my ass kicked.
With simple stuff.
Right.
So basically one of the things that I'm always like bothering my athletes about is breathing through our diaphragms. And the thing about this, when you breathe through your belly and your lower back, what's happening is, first of all, your diaphragm is a core stabilizer. So you're developing the muscles that keep you more stable when you're swimming, biking, and running. And then it also puts your pelvis in a neutral position. So we can get more in depth about that later, but there's all these different things. And those are 2 basic things that I want us to think about. So just as a general thing, this, when your back is arched, is a anterior pelvic tilt. And then when it's tucked is a posterior tilt. And when you focus on breathing through your diaphragm, which includes your core and your back, it gets everything in proper alignment, and it allows you to use your propulsive muscles more efficiently. So when that is all stabilized and strong, then your hip flexors, quads, hamstrings, glutes are more effective at propelling you forward on the bike. So I know that's not exercises, but it's just something to think about. And then for us too, repetitive motion and doing exercises in only one plane of movement, which is what triathlon is, are like the 2 biggest causes of muscle imbalances, which then lead to injuries, which then lead to our bodies not being able to perform the way that we want them to perform. Okay, so we're gonna talk about in-season strength training. And then there's 3 things that I want to talk about here. The first one is dynamic mobility. I might have you demonstrate an exercise just for fun. So dynamic mobility is,
Because this is how real people do exercises versus Laura's, the way Laura perfect people do exercises.
yeah. Okay, so why we want dynamic mobility is static stretching makes us lose the elasticity of our muscles that we need for performing exercise. So if you're just sitting around and stretching your hamstrings, that's really not going to help you with anything, because we don't need elongated hamstrings, especially if you have like a hamstring strain, for example. Like if anybody's ever strained their hamstring and then you stretch it to get better, a hamstring strain means that your hamstring is already in an elongated position, and that's not, you're just making it worse. So we're going to do an example of dynamic mobility. Do you remember how we did the TRX single leg squat with glute stretch?
There's no TRX here.
Yeah, but you can hold on to the wall.
Oh, okay.
Oh, hold on to the chair.
Chair?
So like,
Is it like chair exercises that the 80
it's
plus
a chair
people do?
exercise. Just
Like-
put it that way.
Like here?
Yeah,
This?
that. So she's crossing one leg over and doing a glute stretch. Well, set your hips back further. And so she's doing a single leg squat and she's stretching her glute at the same time. So there's activation happening in the muscle. Like she's actually doing a squat and there's strength being built and she has her leg crossed over. So you're getting dynamic mobility. Can you all see her? Kind of. Yeah. So that's just an example of like one of the ways. And then, dynamic stretching, like when we do our dynamic warm-ups and stuff like that, that counts. Okay. And then the second thing, so the first is dynamic mobility. Number 2 is we're going to focus on multi-joint or whole body exercises. And the whole point of this is you want your body to be able to recruit as many muscles as possible to meet the demands of your sport. So for example, like we all know that our glutes don't engage, right? Like I feel like that's something that we all talk about all the time. So when we do multi-joint whole body exercises, you're training your muscles to be able to all get together and do one action so that when you go out and bike or run and your glutes aren't normally engaging, then they'll know. They're like, oh, we're actually on the same team as the hamstrings and we're going to have to show up to this party and do stuff. So one of the other exercise that I'm going to make Julie do is we do it a back lunge with a twist. So what we're doing when we do this, hold like your pickles like if they're a weight.
You don't have a weight, you can have a cup of pickles.
Yeah, but make sure they're heavy pickles. Okay, so I want you to face forward. So watch her knees. So she's going to do a back lunge and then twist. Go ahead. Slow your pickles and then come back up. Do like 3 more. So what's happening while she's doing that is she's using her hips and the muscles around her knee to stabilize her knee from moving while she twists. So she's getting the lunge and she's also getting oblique stability, core stability, hip stability, all this other stuff at once.
And I'm mixing up my bolter.
And we're mixing up the pickles. So many functions all happening at once. All right. And then the third thing. So we have dynamic mobility, multi-joint whole body exercises, and then we want to move in the frontal plane. And the reason why this is so important is because in triathlon, we're only ever moving. I know it's like the words are weird, but we're only ever moving in the sagittal plane, which means forward. The frontal plane means you move side to side laterally. And the reason you do this is muscle imbalances, again, are caused by repetitive forward motion. So your quads and your hamstrings are working a ton because you're moving forward, and then you're losing all of the work of the muscles that are moving you laterally. So your hips, abductors and adductors, like all that kind of stuff that moves you laterally. So we just want to counteract some of the overwork that those muscles are using by moving in a different plane of motion. Do you want to do some side lunges?
Sure.
So let's do some side lunges. You guys probably know side lunges, but this is just an example of how to move sideways.
Is Julie supposed to be doing these exercises?
Yeah, she's fine.
Okay.
I've taken over her strength program, so we're all set here. That's a
Julie
side
just got
lunge.
off the Alter G.
Yeah.
Okay.
So those are 3 things, especially in season, that you guys want to think about when you're setting up your strength training thoughts. Okay. And then once we move past that kind of stuff, we're also going to talk about, we want to optimize our feedback loop between our mind and our body, the way that you communicate with your body. So there's 2 ways that I want you to think about this. There's in training, we want to think about so what happens when we're thinking about injury prevention is pain is actually the last thing that you're going to feel in your body's protection response if something is off. So before that, all the other things that you could notice are you're going to feel reduced mobility, tightness, stiffness, weakness, swelling, or even mood swings. And the funny thing about mood swings is that's actually the most highly correlated indicator of when you need recovery. It's your mood. There's nothing else that correlates as high. So think about all those other things, especially when you're giving comments on your post workout comments. These are some of the things you could think about. And there's some of the things that you can just focus on before you get to the point where something actually causes pain. And then it causes you to stop having to be able to do your sport. So I know I have a hard time selling strength training for injury prevention, right? Because nobody cares about injury prevention until they've been injured. So the other way that I like people to know that this stuff comes in handy is in the context of a race. We're not thinking about this kind of stuff. So I'm going to talk about myself personally, because as a coach, I love data and numbers. As an athlete, I can't be bothered by it because I'm just listening to what my body's giving me. So in a race, in training, what I'm noticing is if I feel like maybe off balance or misaligned, or if one foot is striking the ground maybe harder than another, those are the kinds of things that I'm like kind of tuning myself into. But in a race, I don't notice those things at all. They're not even in my consciousness, because that's not helpful in a race, right? Like, especially if it's your A race and like, say we were actually going to go do Kona, like I don't give a shit if I'm injuring myself in Kona, right? Like I'm going to still cross the finish line and deal with that later. So in a race, what you can use your body for is you pay attention to your perceived exertion, how sustainable your pace feels, where your core temperature is at, what your fluid needs are, all this kind of stuff that can help you perform better in a race. And you might cross the finish line and your left foot has been hurting the whole time, and you might not find that out until you cross the finish line, because it's about attuning to the information that you need at each phase. Okay. Let me see. So one thing I want to talk about is that our bodies are a more reliable source of information than our brains are. And the reason for that is, how many times have we fallen into the trap of thinking about how we feel instead of just feeling how we feel, right? So like we're like assessing afterwards what's happening, and we're like, shit, I think that my body's doing this thing, so that means I might have to slow down or sit out or whatever that is. And it cuts you off from actually realizing what's happening in your body, and you're limiting that information. So my example of this is like, we might think about it in the context of like diet and nutrition, and in terms of thinking about how we feel. And you might get caught up in the fact of like, I don't want to change my diet. Like, I don't want to eat healthier or make a change that you think you need to change, because you're thinking about the implications of that, of what you're going to actually have to do and how it's going to be harder. Whereas you could just attune yourself to the fact that like, when I eat this certain food, this is how my body feels. Right. So like, you're kind of skipping over that information to get to the part where you're like worried about, well, I don't want to know that from my body because I'm gonna have to do something about it. So that's just like an example of how you think about like what your body is actually telling you versus what your brain is trying to turn it into. And then, so the whole point of this is that we can use our strength training to work on developing this more meaningful feedback loop with our bodies, so that we can start to recognize some of the stuff that's going to make us more successful athletes. Okay, and then we're going to talk about workout comments. I know I have fallen into the trap where I finish a workout and I just write, like, how many of you guys have just written on your workout, it went great, and you just can't think of like anything else? And as a coach, we're like, cool, that's that's not helpful. So some examples of some things we can talk about for post-workout comments is, when you're listening to your body, you can talk about, how hydrated was I? Did I eat before this workout? What did I eat? How is that working? Did my activation exercises make a difference? Do my glutes feel more engaged when I do these certain things? Do I feel like my core is stabilized and allowing me to propel myself forward? All this different stuff. You could also talk about, what story did I tell myself while I was exercising? Did I create a story ahead of time and then fulfill that? And then, write it in your workout comment afterwards. And then, did you decide how your workout was going to go ahead of time? So like, sometimes we go in a workout and we're tired and we think, I'm tired, so it's going to go poorly. And your brain is doing that and not your body. And you're not giving your body a chance to actually show up and do what you need to do in the workout. And, sometimes it doesn't go well. And sometimes your body knows better than you do that you should back off and not create more problems. Okay.
Laura, I have a question for you. Do all your athletes do amazing comments?
Jimbo, what do we think about that? I'm gonna call out Sam in a second too.
Do
I'm
what
just
kind of
saying-
comments?
Go ahead.
No, I tend to write a lot just because I get excited sometimes about some workouts, and I usually always forewarn her before that. It's like, hey, it's gonna be a long comment, so just sit down with a glass of wine.
Yeah. So actually, I wanna call out Sam. though.
Sorry, Julie, I'm horrible. I'm going to get better, I promise.
It's different. Everybody's different.
Well, but these are some ways that you can get better. So
I
that's the
know,
thing.
yeah,
Yeah,
I'm thinking
And I
about
think
them.
sometimes we're not good at it because we're not actually listening to our bodies and what they're telling us. So we can't give our coaches the feedback that they need to be better. So Sam, I just want to call out Sam because she will write to me like, this is how engaged my core felt, and this is what was happening in my body, and this is how my swim stroke was going. And it's like,
Oh, my God.
it is a lot, but it's like, for what she wants to get out of the sport and how successful she wants to be, she's so good at like actually like, so I know then like I don't necessarily like I need that information, of course, for strength training and helping her move forward, but it's really important for her too, that in the context of the workout that she knows, hey, I felt off and this is why. Like not maybe because I was tired, but maybe because like I couldn't get like the catch right on my swim stroke or something like that. So not everybody's great at it, but so
Well, I think the thing
I'm getting better.
the thing is that, I mean, we're coaches, but we're athletes too. And I find myself, when I have a coach that challenges me on like, well, why do you think that happened? Instead of like, it's really easy when a workout goes really well or really poorly to say, I fucking rocked that or fuck that sucked, right? I use a lot of fuck. But it's like, but the real thing is
Right.
why did that go that way? And then that's when you start to look introspectively and say, like personally, I have trouble eating before swimming. I just do, but I can't swim 5,000 yards without eating. So it's like, oh, I actually took it a gel and I had extra coffee with coconut cream, and that, so it helps you in your brain link it to like, oh, this was really successful, or this was really unsuccessful because that banana was haunting me for 5,000 yards. So I mean, yeah, there's all sorts of different ways to put comments in there.
So I recently made a strength training program for one of Julie's athletes, Sarah. And one of the things that I did in there that I think is a really good way to get started with some of this stuff is I give her one exercise every week, literally just one that she's supposed to do every day, where she thinks about every single thing that's happening in her body during that one exercise. So, and sometimes it's just a stretch. So like the first exercise or stretch I gave her was literally just child's pose in yoga. Do you guys know what that is? You just like lay on the ground and it feels good and it stretches everything. And so what we work on in that is we work on breathing through your diaphragm, because you're in a position where when you're in that position, you can feel, if you're breathing into your back, you can feel your back getting closer to your feet. You can try to take the time and notice, like, I forget all the comments. I wrote her like 8 comments of everything to focus on. So it's just about taking the time, and like maybe you only do, you only find a couple of strength exercises that fit into your schedule and you can do them regularly, but you can do them to check in with yourself. Because when we're swimming, biking, and running, like we have to get in this volume for the stuff that we're training for. And that's where strength training can kind of be supportive, as we can take a couple exercises and just tune in and be like, okay, what is my body actually saying? Am I tighter in this position than I was yesterday? Is my like breathing restricted? Am I doing all this chest breathing, which when you're chest breathing, what that often means is you're only in your sympathetic nervous system, which is flight, fight, or freeze. And when you don't shift into your parasympathetic, which is rest and digest, you can't actually recover. So taking those like full body deep breaths and getting air and breath into your diaphragm, it's a core stabilizer, and it actually helps you recover better. So there's all these different ways that you can check in with your body. If you just like take the time, do a couple strength training exercises, it doesn't have to be a whole program, but just listening to your body through them. And that's kind of my whole point of this thing, is like strength training is a tool to help us with our sport in so many other ways than just making us strong. It actually helps us be able to do this for a lot longer, a lot more longevity and better performance. Any other questions? No. Okay.
No, but I do like the fact that this was recorded because this is a lot of great information. Even though I'm not asking questions or we're not asking questions, it's a lot of really good information. So I'm excited about it. Thank you.
Cool, yeah.
There's a doc, are you gonna share the document too?
Yeah, I can
Yeah.
do that.
Yeah, awesome.
And when we back in the off season, I'll do weekly strength training sessions again too with everybody. I think that's a good way to do it. So who's really good at doing their strength training? Jimbo, you can raise your hand. Derek, you're kind of good.
Decent. I'm okay.
Well, Julie's back in the room, so I won't comment.
I totally agree. I don't want to say anything either.
I love her.
Pretty good, actually. No, it's just even the simplest things that you give me, sometimes I can't get into that position because I'm just so tight and not bendy and my body just doesn't want to cooperate. And so it kind of, you get this defeated attitude, but you just keep trying and maybe one day your leg will actually go that high.
So when you're feeling tight and not bendy, you should tell your coach that. That'd be a good workout comment to feel. And then she can maybe give you a modification for it so that you can start to work from something that actually works for your body. That's the point of this too, is like we're like the strength training stuff that you get from your coach should not be stuff that you can't do. Cause then is not,
Then you don't do it. I already know that.
then you not only do not do it, but if you try to do it, it's not actually supporting your swim, bike and run. It's not what it's there for.
And it's okay to say that. I get stuff from my coach that I've been afraid to do, and Laura had to teach me how to do it yesterday. And I just tell her, like, I don't know how to do this. And like, it keeps showing up and means I should know how to do it, I think. But so I think I'm just saying it happens to me too. And that's the best way to communicate it. Okay. Okay.